festivities. He tells him about his new mercenary company, and also brings up the fact that Lara may be the savior. Orsted notes that in other timelines, the partner of the sacred beast was male, and that he defeated demon god Laplace when he revived. However, Orsted did note that Hidegami spent a lot of effort to prevent Rudeus and Roxy's fates from intertwining. Ruddy speculates that perhaps his daughter has taken the original hero's place as the savior, and Orsted concludes that Lara will likely be a major obstacle for Hidegami in the future. Ruddy then goes to school to meet Cliff and Zenoba, and he sees them arguing with each other. Zenoba reveals that he has received a royal command to return back to his home country. His brother Pax succeeded in a coup, executed his father and brothers, and took the throne. So after the civil war, there is a high chance that other countries might invade Shire. Therefore Zenoba received a royal command to return to his country and assist in defending it. Hearing this, Ruddy realizes that this is likely to be his next fight, and that it has come earlier than he predicted. Zenoba explains the situation to Cliff, Ruddy, Elena Lees, Julie and Ginger. He reveals that his brother Pax was exiled to the kingdom of the Dragon King, but Pax somehow gained their backing and successfully initiated a coup in Shire. He killed the previous Shirene king and the rest of the royal family, and became the new king of Shirene Kingdom. As a result of the coup, Shire's military force has declined, and they worry that the countries to the north will take advantage of the situation and attack Shire. Therefore, Zenoba was summoned by King Pax to return to Shire to defend his home nation. Cliff and Ruddy question Zenoba on why he wants to comply with the summon and return home. They warned him that this is likely a trap for Pax to have Zenoba killed. Zenoba admits he doesn't want to work under Pax. However, Zenoba reflects on how, due to his lack of control over his own strength, he has ripped the heads off of several people, including his former wife, which precipitated a civil war. But despite all this, he was not punished. Zenoba therefore feels that he owes his country in return. Zenoba feels that he was spared punishment so that he could save his country in times of crisis. But he also acknowledges the fact that if he returns, one way or another, he will likely get killed. Ruddy doesn't want his friend to die, so he announces that he will be accompanying Zenoba to the kingdom of Shirene. So Ruddy discusses this situation with Orsted, and Orsted reveals that in his timeline, 30 years into the future, Pax started a coup and took over the throne of his kingdom. He then began questioning his own kingship, so he vacated the throne and reorganized the kingdom into a republic. Then the Shirene Republic became a major world power, and was a major hindrance to Hidegami. Orsted also warns him that Zenoba being summoned back is likely bait to draw in and kill both Ruddy and Zenoba. Orsted wonders if someone in the kingdom of Dragon King may be Hidegami's apostle, so Orsted announces that he will go to the kingdom of Dragon King to investigate for apostles, while Ruddy goes to Shirene to help Zenoba. Despite it being a trap, Orsted also tells Ruddy to avoid killing Pax, even if he's an apostle, as if he's killed Shirene cannot become a republic in the future. So Ruddy then tells his family that he will go to Shirene, but Lara then starts crying and Roxy sees this as a sign, and she decides to accompany Ruddy to Shirene. When Roxy announces this, Lara instantly stops crying. Ruddy reveals to them that going to Shirene is likely a trap set by Hidegami, but Roxy still insists on going, so Ruddy and Zenoba prepare their combat equipment before going to Shirene. Ruddy brings both his bulky magic armor Mark I and the more manageable magic armor Mark II, as well as the shotgun cannon. Then they go to Sky Castle to borrow Perugius' magic teleportation circles. Zenoba explains to Perugius his situation and why he is heading back to Shirene. But Perugius also tries to convince Zenoba not to go back to Shirene, as he doesn't want Zenoba to die, because Perugius enjoys Zenoba's company and their chats about art. Zenoba asks to borrow Perugius' magic teleportation circles. He also begs Perugius to temporarily lift the rule that bans all magic races from entering the Sky Castle, and to allow Roxy to enter Sky Castle, so that she may also use the magic teleportation circles. Perugius reluctantly agrees, under the condition that Roxy does not speak and does not touch anything. Ginger goes ahead of the group to investigate Shirene Kingdom. She discovers that King Pax has 10 knights from the kingdom of Dragon King, and that one of them is the Death God, who is one of the 7 great world powers. So the night before their departure, Orsted visits Rudy's house for an emergency meeting. Orsted gives his predictions based on Ginger's report regarding Pax's 10 knights. He states that 9 of them are likely weak. However, the 10th knight is likely Death God Randolph, who is ranked 5th of the 7 great world powers. The Death God has the ability Sword of Luring, which entices an enemy to attack when he should retreat, and sort of hesitation, which forces an enemy to retreat when he should attack. Orsted reassures Ruti that although he is a difficult opponent, Ruti should be able to handle him now that he understands his enemy's ability. In terms of the Death God's backstory, Orsted reveals that Randolph is the grandson of the second North God, and after beating the original Death God, he gained the title. He then was fed up with fighting and retired to become a chef in his hometown at Kingdom of Dragon King. He had no talent as a chef and became buried in debt. He was then picked up by a general of Kingdom of Dragon King and became a knight of the kingdom. So Ruti then says goodbye to his family, and Julie will also be living with Ruti's family, while Zenoba and Ginger are gone. So Ruti and Roxy then meet up with Zenoba at the city entrance. Cliff and Elinellis are there too, and they say their goodbyes. They go to Sky Castle and say goodbye to Nanahoshi. Then they use the magic teleportation circle and arrive in a teleportation ruin on the edge of Shirney Kingdom. From there it takes 5 days to journey to the capital, so when the group arrives in Shirney, they plan to have an audience with the king. Meanwhile, Ruti considers in his mind various outcomes from their meeting with the king, and considers how he will eventually get Zenoba to return. Roxy sees that Ruti is distressed and tells him to relax. So Rudeus and Zenoba have an audience with King Pax. Pax questions them on how they arrived in Shirney so quickly, but he doesn't pursue the matter when Zenoba refuses to give a clear answer. Pax also questions why Ruti is present. Pax wonders out loud if Rudeus is there to kill him, but Zenoba denies this. Pax introduces Death God Randolph, and Randolph introduces himself. He explains that his main job is killing, but that his hobby is cooking, and that he's a nice guy. Pax asks Zenoba if they should let Rudeus and Randolph fight to see who is stronger. So after hearing this, Ruti reties himself for a fight, but Pax then diffuses the situation, as he says he was joking. Pax says he no longer holds a grudge against Zenoba and Ruti. He recounts how he was sent to the Kingdom of Dragon King. While there, Pax worked on improving himself, developing his magic and physique. Pax then gained the attention of the king and was offered a reward. Pax asks for permission to marry the 18th Princess Benedict King Dragon. The king gives permission, under the condition that Pax return to Shirne, attain a high-ranking role and then have Shirney send another prince as an exchange. But the Shirney kingdom refused to this, and this enraged the Dragon King, who sent Death God Randolph and the Order of Black Knights, with Pax to initiate a coup. They murdered the rest of the royal family, and installed Pax on the throne. So back in the present day, Zenoba asks why he was summoned if Pax has access to the Death God. Pax responds that the Death God is alone from the Dragon King. Then Pax reassures Zenoba that he has no plans to exact revenge on Zenoba, and asks Zenoba to lend his strength, and Zenoba accepts his request. Pax then gives Zenoba command over Fort Karen and tells him to stop the northern invasion. So Zenoba and Ruddy then leave the audience room. Zenoba feels that Pax has changed, but Ruddy jokes that Pax may be manipulated by an evil god. Zenoba therefore asks if Ruddy is referring to the evil god he is fighting against. Zenoba refers to the dinner they had with Cliff, where Ruddy revealed that he was working with Orsted to fight Hidegami. Zenoba thought it was a joke at the time, but with Cliff working on an anti-curse device for Orsted and all of Ruddy's missions, Zenoba started to wonder if the evil god may be real. So Ruddy then reveals the truth about Hidegami, and how Pax may be manipulated by Hidegami, and that Ruddy is forbidden from killing Pax. So Zenoba understands the situation, and announces that he will try to protect Pax from Hidegami. On the other hand, Ruddy is worried whether this is a trap, and if not whether Pax may change his mind and try to kill Zenoba. So Ruddy thinks to himself that he will discuss this with Roxy tomorrow. So Ruddy discusses with Roxy all his worries and concerns, such as the fact that he is suspicious of the king of the Kingdom of Dragon King, and that he is uncertain about Hidegami's intent. Roxy reveals that new information from Ginger has arrived. According to her, their force at Fort Karen is only staffed with 500 soldiers, while their enemy's force is nearly 5,000. However, given that Ruddy and Roxy are Emperor-ranked and King-ranked magicians respectively, each of them could theoretically hold off over 1,000 soldiers. They then debate on whether Pax intended their placement to be a trap, given that they are outnumbered. Ruddy then considers his current hypothesis on the identities of Hidegami's 3 apostles. One is the king of the Kingdom of Dragon King, and another is someone from the group attacking Fort Karen, but the third person is still unknown. They agree that going to Fort Karen is likely a trap, but they go anyway as they wish to save Zenoba, as they know that Zenoba will go regardless. Ruddy relates to Zenoba the fact that Fort Karen has 500 soldiers against 5,000 attacking soldiers. Zenoba remains unworried as he knows he has Rudeus and Roxy on his side, and each of them is worth at least 1,000 soldiers. He also points out that since they are defending a fort, they are in an advantageous position, as it typically takes forces 3 times in occupying force to storm a castle. Ruddy warns that Zenoba is likely being used as a sacrificial pawn by Pax, but Zenoba remains undeterred. He is fine with the idea of being sacrificed, and continues to insist that fighting for his country is his duty. So Roxy, Rudeus, and Zenoba travel to Fort Karen, and Ginger remains in the capital city. During the journey, Ruddy is anxious about the idea of entering a war, but neither Zenoba nor Roxy are bothered. After 9 days of travel, they reach Fort Karen. There, they meet Knight Garrick, the one currently in command of the fort. Zenoba informs Garrick that he will be taking over command, but given his inexperience, he will continue to rely on Garrick. Zenoba then gathers all the troops for a speech and introduction. Zenoba introduces himself as well as Ruddy and Roxy. He highlights their incredible power and successfully raises his troops' morale. Ruddy looks at him and is impressed with Zenoba's show of leadership. So Ruddy and Zenoba go outside of Fort Karen to the locations where they expect to be attacked, and Ruddy spends time modifying the terrain with earth magic and setting traps to make it difficult for their advancing enemies. Ruddy assembles his magic armor, which is meant for close combat, and also he fortifies the fort. Meanwhile, Roxy teaches magic to the soldiers and other staff at the fort. He notes that while Roxy and Zenoba are popular, but they seem to be afraid of him and avoid him, which he suspects is due to the fact that he rearranged the battlefield so effortlessly. They have also received support from the Kingdom of Dragon King, not through reinforcements, but by sending supplies, which include food, such as rice. They receive news that the enemy troops will arrive in approximately 5 days, so they continue with their preparations. Roxy works on drawing magic circles which generate fire magic, meant for multiple soldiers to use. Ruddy thinks to himself that he will have to kill in this war, and reflects on how he has killed others in the past, and it left a bad aftertaste. Ruddy confesses to Roxy that he is reluctant to kill people. Roxy reveals that while she has never been in a war, she has no issue with killing others, based on her experience of adventuring. Meanwhile, Zenoba and a crew of 100 men had gone off on their own mission, which is apparently to kill or capture the enemy commander. Soon, the battle with the enemy begins. The enemy started using magic to try to fill in the trenches and traps that Ruddy had built, but Ruddy is able to easily counteract these attempts. The enemies then try to advance by building bridges over the traps, but the Fort Coron soldiers shoot fire attacks at the enemy, using magic circles. The enemy tries to protect their own troops and counteract the fire attacks with water magic of their own. However, because of this, Ruddy is able to see the origin of this water magic, and therefore the location of the magicians. He easily eliminates the enemy magicians, and with the enemy magicians gone, the Sharon forces are easily able to crush their enemies using magic, as the enemy no longer has a method to counteract magic, so the Sharon soldiers easily win the battle with minimal losses. Soon Zenoba then returns, and only 10 of his original 100 soldiers remain. However, they were successful in capturing the enemy's commander, who is a member of the enemy's royal family. With this, they hope to negotiate to end the war. Zenoba reveals that, while they were within the enemy lines, he and his team were caught in Ruddy's and Roxy's attacks, but Zenoba tells Ruddy not to feel guilty about this, and that any blame lays solely on him. That evening, an assailant from the enemy came to try to rescue their royal family member, but Ruddy was able to quickly stun the assailant and hand him over to the fort soldiers. Ruddy is worried that he will be attacked this night by the death god, but no attack ever comes. The next morning, Zenoba and Ruddy interrogate their royal hostage. They learn that the northern enemy had been planning an attack on Sharony for some time, and the hostage denied any knowledge of Hidegami. Ruddy wonders if maybe coming to Sharon wasn't a trap after all, and that Hidegami had nothing to do with this. 10 days later, the enemy nation offered a truce, and Fort Karen sends a message back to the capital about the victory, the hostage, and the possible truce. Soon Ginger arrives at Fort Karen. Back from the capital, she reports that a local warlord Jade has risen up and launched a coup against King Pax in the name of 11th Prince Haruha Sharony. Jade launched an attack at this time because he hoped that the battle at Fort Karen would go poorly, forcing Pax to send the death which would leave Pax vulnerable. This did not happen, but nevertheless, Jade felt that this was still the best time to attack. Zanoba announces that he will return to the capital to defend Pax. Ginger and Ruddy are surprised, and they point out that Zanoba has finished his duty of protecting his country, and to return back to Sharia with them. Zanoba reveals that his main motivation isn't just to protect his country, but to also protect Pax, who is his younger brother. Hearing this, Ruddy respects Zanoba's decision to remain in Sharoni to protect Pax. Ginger strongly dislikes Pax as he had kidnapped her family as hostages in the past. Jade accepts that she cannot change Zanoba's mind, but she asks Zanoba to promise not to die, even if Pax orders it. Ruddy answers on Zanoba's behalf and he promises to make sure Zanoba doesn't die. So Ruddy, Zanoba, and Roxy travel back to the Sharoni capital city. Ruddy wears his magic armor, Mark 1 on the trip, despite its magical power drain, so that he can avoid disassembling and reassembling the armor on the route. They reach the capital after 5 days. At the entrance to the royal castle, there were a large number of people, including soldiers, merchants, and adventurers. Zanoba suggests that they enter the castle by a secret passageway to avoid getting detected. He directs them to an underground passageway by the water mill. They travel through the underground passageway. The passageway is narrow, so Ruddy swaps out the bulky but powerful Mark 1 armor for the more portable, but less powerful Mark 2 armor. They go to the end of the passageway and open a metal door, whereupon they find a dead end. Roxy suggests that the passageway may have been sealed by an earthquake or intentionally by Jade's forces, so Ruddy uses earth magic to tunnel through. They then find themselves in a cave, which Roxy identifies as being similar to a labyrinth. At Roxy's advice, Ruddy keeps digging a path until they reach another passage. They follow this passage until they find themselves in the room in the castle where Ruddy was imprisoned many years ago, and where Zanoba and Ruddy first met. So, they search the castle floor by floor, but see no one, not a single person. They eventually reach the king's room on the 5th floor, and they see the death god Randolph guarding the room. Randolph is sitting on a chair and looking relaxed. He comments how having a room on the 5th floor is inconvenient, and how if he were king, his room would be on the 1st floor. Zanoba asks about the state of the castle, so Randolph reveals a red eye with 6 stars under his eye patch, and states that he used his eye to construct a barrier around the castle to protect the king, and everyone else who isn't dead has fled the castle. Zanoba tries to enter the king's room, but the death god Randolph refuses to let him pass, stating that he was ordered by the king to let no one pass. Zanoba tries to force himself through, but Randolph easily pushes Zanoba away. Ruddy tries to defuse the situation, but he notes to himself that since both Randolph and their side are trying to protect Pax, they shouldn't be enemies. So, Ruddy thinks to himself that it would be a different matter if Randolph was Hitagami's apostle, but he feels that this is unlikely, since if this was the case, Pax would be dead already. However, just to be sure, Ruddy asks Randolph if he knows of Hitagami. Randolph laughs and confirms that he does. Ruddy now considers Randolph to be his enemy and prepares himself for combat. In response, Randolph draws his sword, which emits a green light, and Rudeus muses to himself that he is only wearing the Mark Roman 2 armor. Ruddy, Roxy, and Zanoba fight the death god Randolph. They initially land a series of blows, and although Randolph initially pretends to be hurt, he shrugs them off. He lands a significant blow on Roxy, which he only survived due to one-time use of magic items. Ruddy recognizes that this battle is not winnable and instructs Roxy and Zanoba to retreat. Ruddy asks Randolph what instructions he's received from Hitagami. Randolph reveals that while he has heard of Hitagami, he has never actually spoken to him. Ruddy realizes that he is misjudged, and they apologize to each other for fighting. Randolph states that King Pax's ritual has now ended, and so they may enter to meet him. They enter Pax's room. They see Pax's wife, Benedict, laying in the bed, and they can smell the scent of recent sex, while Pax is standing on the balcony. Zanoba announces he is here to help, and that they may retreat to Fort Karen, but Pax rejects this idea. He monologues about how he had tried his best to be a good king, and as evidenced by the current rebellion, his subjects still do not support him. Pax reflects on how none of his efforts are ever rewarded. He recounts how when he was learning magic under Roxy he excitedly showed her how he mastered intermediate magic, and Roxy only sighed. Pax reveals that this was particularly devastating for him as he greatly respected Roxy, and felt she was the only one to give him attention, and still his efforts were not recognized. Pax feels like a failure. The king of Dragon Kingdom gave him Sharon Kingdom, but it is ultimately not recognized as king by its people. So suddenly, Pax jumps off the balcony and they try to catch him, but he hits the ground and dies. Pax had committed suicide. Ruti and Zenoba are shocked at the sudden turn of events.